one of the themes I wanted to talk about today was current AI LLMs. They're good at delight. If you want it to do analysis of your medical records and figure out, okay, what did the doctor do wrong? I'm going to caution you against that. I'm going to say that's probably you're probably going to get an answer, but that answer you get, I'm not so sure I'd be very confident in it. We've seen that with law systems and whatever else. They make up citations of cases that don't exist.
All right, we are joined today by Brad Hutchings, who was recommended to me by a friend of the show, Pete A. Turner of the Break It Down show. And Brad has been working, I don't know, with or against or tangentially around AI.
I'm doing great, Eric. Good to meet you. Good to be on your show. I'll tell you my little origin story with AI. About a year ago, January, was working at a small company. We had a guy come in who was going to, and I was a developer and sort of a product developer, if you will. We had a guy come in who was going to lay the hammer on the developers. And he was not coming from a point of knowledge or anything else. Small company dynamics are what they are. It was a disaster from the start. But his first edict was everybody has to start using AI tools because within 6 months, remember this is January of last year before ChatGPT-4, within 6 months, they're going to change the way you do your jobs and probably take all the coding away from you. And of course, I have a computer science educational background. I have a BS and MS in computer science from UC Irvine, which in 1994, when I got my master's, and this was a concentration in algorithms and data structures, so like the physics of computer science, all right? In 1994, it was a top 5 program. So I have a good educational pedigree on which to, look at these constant stream of gloom and doom in computers and whatever else and kind of say, yeah, that makes sense, or that doesn't make sense. So this one didn't make sense. And the more I dug into it and the more I kind of found out about AI and, the current fascination with large language models and stuff like that, the more I realized this isn't going to change the way we code. I'm actually faster. I'm still faster finding things I need with Google search than I am putting it in the hands of the LLM to, quote, write code for me. And I've had a lot of people that I respect tell me over the past year, I respect them professionally as developers and stuff, tell me over the past year, well, you can just write this, you can just write your Python code with this tool. This tool will write it for you. And, I humor them. And then I spend some time and I go and I see, and well, sure, it'll give me a snippet. But I could find that snippet just as fast with Google search or, searching my own code or whatever else. And I've heard a lot of explanations for this. And, maybe for a new coder, this is a good tool. But, you might be familiar with how software development works and the spread of talent. And let's see if I can draw it for you over here. It's like new coder, median coder, and then there's this long tail to, your best 10% are 20, 30 times as productive as your median coder. And this has been this way all throughout the history of software development. It's an interesting distribution, but what it also says is a tool like an LLM that might be, spitting out Python code for you. Right now, very applicable to the newbies, not very applicable to probably half of your coders. They use all these examples of, I can implement quicksort really quickly with so-and-so's Python LLM. Nobody's ever asked to implement quicksort. It's a library function. You call a library function for it. The canonical examples, nobody's asked to do those. You're asked to do very specific things.
Sure. I don't want to get too deep into it because we're starting to get really deep in the nerdery at the moment. Okay, so first off, AI or artificial intelligence, I have heard it argued that what we are seeing now with ChatGPT and things like that is technically not even AI. It is really machine learning
Yes.
and large
Yeah,
language
in fact, that's
sites,
when we
large
say AI
language
today, we're
models.
talking about large language models. That's typically what we're talking about. This is not very new technology. Um,
Can we define what
sure.
that is? Because, we just throw LLM, ML, AI. These things are very confusing. And I want to talk to a general audience. Like, what is a large
So
language
I'll
model?
talk about it for a general audience. Is let's say I have mountains and mountains of pages that I can read. And so I have the computer read them in, and I have it compute statistics about word ordering. This is basically what it does. And then once I have all these statistics in place, and it uses some neural nets, and it uses all sorts of interesting data structures and whatever, I can ask it a question, and it can sort of figure out what my question's about, and then it wordsmiths from. This is basically what it does. It basically wordsmiths from its call it a corpus of documents it was trained on. And what we're doing now that we weren't doing 10 years ago is we're doing it at web scale, where you might have millions and millions of web pages that have been indexed and been used to train one of these LLMs. And in fact, training these LLMs on web scale documents can take months, using a lot of very, very powerful hardware. Now, it turns out the lookups are actually really, really quick, and that's the cool thing about them. I don't need ChatGPT 4.5 to do some interesting LLM work. I can actually do it on my own computer, if I have an LLM that's pre-trained. So I think, does that sort of lay the groundwork?
A little bit. Some people are almost insulting to it and saying it's nothing more than a search engine.
No.
And I think that's playing it
Yeah,
down a
yeah.
little bit, and it's somewhere in the middle. But then that is not the only quote AI we have going. We also have things like 11 Labs, which is doing audio
Mm-hmm.
work, which I think is actually very powerful and very interesting. Some of the art is interesting. As an example, I'm going to step back
Mm-hmm.
into the audio because I think there's good and bad with everything you
Mm-hmm.
have out there. There's softwares out there. I think it's called lalol.ai, and you can put a song in it and it splits it into
Yeah.
stems. And that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
neat. That I think is some useful technology like, hey, I want to do a karaoke, so eliminate the
Mm-hmm.
vocal track or things like that.
Whether they're using
So,
AI or they're using, what might fall under AI, or whether they're using, some advanced filter mechanisms or whatever. I think it
mhm,
maybe the distinguishing characteristic is, to us, it looks like magic.
sure.
That might be a good way to put it.
Um, as a matter of fact, too, I don't know if it was Ray Bradbury or Isaac Asimov or whatever, but when technology is
Or magic.
indistinguishable from
Yeah.
magic, there's a quote there, and it does seem almost magical. But I fear, and I think I'm probably right, that like any other computer programming, you have the GIGO issue, which is garbage
Yep.
in, garbage out.
Yep.
And you also have an added problem of political and cultural philosophy that is being put into the
Sure. Look at Google.
training
Look at Google
of these
Gemini. Right.
AIs. I'm going there, but not to worry. Adobe said, "Hold my
Right.
beer," and one up
Right.
them. I don't know if
I
you've
have an
seen that,
Adobe
but
subscription, and I've resisted all the, every day there's something, try our AI, and okay, no, I'm really more interested in for making cute Photoshop pictures. That's what I do. Probably don't need your AI for that. But yes, I've seen.
well, just for the audience, Gemini has been so concerned about diversity that it has diversified actual cultural figures and race swapped popes, founding fathers, things of that sort. And then Adobe Firefly went one further and now has black World War II German
Right.
figures in their art. And this is YouTube, so we have to be careful how we say things. But The problem that I see, again, this is the gigo issue. It is perfectly logical for machine learning to spit out those results. If you tell them to inject race or diversity into whatever, it doesn't know the difference between a founding father or a pope or a World War II German bad guy. It's just going to inject diversity. This is the information you
Look,
gave.
I am down with Black George Washington. All right, as long as he's got his wooden teeth, and he didn't have his wooden teeth. He had a nicer smile than I do. You know, I mean, that's probably the most egregious part of it.
It's done in real life. It's done in real life with Hamilton, right? With that, I have concerns overall because I use a lot of ChatGPT. I use a lot of these, and I do see actual value out there just for, doing heavy lifting. As an example, if I want to take a transcript of a show that I did and say split it into chapters, I'm very comfortable with that because I'm not injecting any new information. I'm supplying 100% of the content I want to be parsed.
And it'll usually parse it for you the way you want it. And you know what? The consequences are not terrible if it messes up. Like that's a distinguishing characteristic of it. One of the themes I wanted to talk about today was current AI LLMs. They're good at delight. If you want it to do analysis of your medical records and figure out, okay, what did the doctor do wrong? I'm going to caution you against that. I'm going to say that's probably you're probably going to get an answer, but that answer you get, I'm not so sure I'd be very confident in it. We've seen that with law systems and whatever else. They make up citations of cases that don't exist. And these are filed in briefs. This is scary, right?
Right. But it can be useful on the counterpoint of what kind of medications have I taken for which conditions and for how long?
Yeah, certain factual data, sure. And even then, I wouldn't trust it with knowing the facts completely. It sort of has a search bias at the beginning and a search bias at the end. And that's, the data structure itself of how these LLMs work and, how they know what's up with all their data. It's not like your data is in a structured database and you're running a structured query against it. And it's a different way of information lookup.
Right. Well, and it's my job to make sure the things are spelled correctly in the transcript. I mean, Smith with an E.
Yeah, certainly your guess names you want to get right. But if in the middle of it gets an esoteric word that somebody dropped, halfway wrong, okay, that's not hurting you too much.
I also use it for things like upscaling images.
Well,
now that's not perfect, but then again, when I'm dealing with images from 1962,
it can help you.
I'm very limited in what I can do with what I have, unless I'm an artist and I'm going to paint it. It's not going to happen.
Right. It gives you it doesn't give you detail that wasn't there, but it renders detail that might be there. And I think that's the difference. You wouldn't use that as, it's not enhance on one of the CSI shows. Enhance, where there's no right. It's not that.
Absolutely. And you can't get artifacts that don't exist. No, it is for the purpose of, boy, that's nicer to look at than this grainy picture. And yes, that looks like him. Okay.
A lot of the times with AI, what's so appealing to us is we want answers, and it will give us an answer. It doesn't often bow out. When it does bow out, it's because, hey, your question is not politically correct or not according to Google's training. Yeah, right. But we got a dog. We adopted a little dog in November, and he's the cutest little thing. I'm surprised he hasn't jumped up on the table to be on the interview yet. We have no idea what he is. He looks like a Jack Russell and Corgi mix. And so I asked ChatGPT, make me a Pixar cartoon with a Jack Russell Corgi mix doing something. And it spit out this picture that looked just like him, right? So So this kind of confirmed to us it was a Jack Russell Corgi mix. Well, we recently ordered a DNA test on him. And again, this is we want answers, right? Does it matter what kind of dog he is? I mean, not even for, he's not a kind of dog that's going to disqualify us from insurance, or, we don't have breed specific legislation in California, et cetera. It doesn't matter, but we wanted an answer. So we got the answer back yesterday. And it turns out that he's 38% Chihuahua. Now, do we love him any less? Okay, if I have to be honest, yeah, I love him a lot less that he's a Chihuahua than a Jack Russell, right? But I wouldn't tell anybody. I certainly wouldn't tell him. It doesn't really matter. We wanted an answer.
The result, though, is ironic. Like, I'm going to take this. I take this from Elon Musk. It's one of my favorite things. You've heard of Occam's razor, right? He doesn't call it this, but I call it that. The ironic razor. And essentially, with Occam's razor, it's like sometimes the result is the most straightforward, simple result. Well, the ironic razor is whatever the result is, it'll wind up being ironic. Now, in the case of your dog, if you think about it, you asked for that input and you got an output that was exactly what you were looking for, even though it wasn't accurate, which is the irony. And it might be that there's a common misperception of mixed Chihuahuas, people thinking Jack Russell.
Right. And we're debating getting a different DNA test. And so, okay, so I asked myself, what would happen if we get the same results? Well, we'll be double disappointed. What would happen if we get different results? Then we know that there's a little bit more magic 8-ball to these dog DNA tests than, maybe everybody might think. So, like, either answer is not a good answer, right? But, it's a cool thing with AI is we can ask these things where there isn't a good answer, and it'll give us an answer, and we'll be sad or happy or whatever with it for some reason. At least we won't not know. And that seems to be the kind of the human thing of, I'm not comfortable not knowing this. AI, give me an answer. And that seems to be what draws us in.
Could be. Now, I want to ask another question, because AI versus algorithms. Can you explain the difference or similarities?
So AI is an algorithm. It's a big algorithm. I'll define an algorithm later. It's a big algorithm applied on, web scale data as we see it today, or more data than any of us could get our hands on, to start with. An algorithm it's like a recipe. It's a sequence of steps. One of the things that really interests me, and I'll go back to my grad school, I had a professor, Lee Osterweil, and I had like 2 classes in a course with him, but it's probably the most important thing I learned in grad school. He was having his grad students, this is again, early 90s, he was having them take things that you did, like recipes or like your exercise routine or whatever else, and try to write it as a program. And he called it, at the time he was calling it process programming. And it went off in a direction, of course, everything back then was all about, military and aerospace funding for computer science and stuff. And it kind of went off in that direction, formal languages and whatever. But, we do a lot of that ourselves, where we program ourselves to do some things. And think of an algorithm like that. It's just you've got a computer that does it and doesn't make mistakes. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. When you have something this large and you have probabilities and stuff involved, there's a certain randomness to it, or it certainly appears that way. You ask your favorite, AI chat, tell me a story about Paul Bunyan and Eeyore saving the Oakland A's, right? And you'll get a whole bunch of great stories from it. Like reload. You'll get tremendous variation of stories, and they'll all be. I saw you smile. They'll all be delightful, right? That's what the AI is really, really good at that we have right now.
A toy. You're describing a toy.
Yeah, I mean, the way I've been describing, I have a friend who, sort of tangentially involved in my business and has been pushing me to, have an AI story. And the thing that I tell him about AI is it's like the talking frog. You know, the engineer and the talking frog joke. Engineer's walking down a path one day, and he sees a frog, and the frog says, "Hey, pick me up. I'm a talking frog." And so the engineer picks him up, and the frog says, "Hey, if you kiss me, I'll turn into a beautiful princess and grant all your wishes for all your life. You'll live a wonderful life." The engineer takes the frog and puts him in his pocket. And a couple weeks later, the frog says, "Hey, remember I told you if you kiss me, I'll turn into a princess, grant all your wishes your whole life. You'll live a wonderful life. You'll have nothing to want for. Why don't you kiss me?" And the engineer says, "Look, that's just a lot of problems. But you know what I got right now is I got a talking frog. And that's pretty cool, right?" This is AI right now. AI is a talking frog. We're looking for solutions for it. Um, the big solutions are going to come from people who want answers to things, and answers that it can provide that provide some meaning or make some sense. And that's a small subset of all problems that we have. It's
But now the concern that I
yeah,
have is it's seeping into browser
yeah,
results, search results. Um, I don't like being controlled and told culturally, politically how to
mm-hmm.
speak or what to think. It is if you use ChatGPT a lot and you ask
Oh
the wrong
yeah,
queries,
yeah.
it
So
lectures
I had a
you quite
project. I had a
literally.
project recently. It turned out to not be a successful project. I hate it when I don't have a successful project. But one of the things we needed to do was generate pictures of people um, that were variously affected by AI. Their jobs were, their careers were, and so I had it generate some pictures for me. And ChatGPT and Dolly is ChatGPT's image model. It gave me a bunch of white guys in an office. Okay. And so we looked at the results. And we're like, okay, well, this isn't gonna play very well. We gotta mix this up a little bit. So um, I asked it to generate images for me for various ranges of how AI is gonna call it a scale of 1 to 10. AI is gonna affect your job, and then I went white male, black female, Hispanic male, Hispanic female, Asian female, Indian male, Indian female, to get a good representation across each of those score ranges. When we got to unemployed, it would not generate an unemployed black man for me. It would do all the others. It absolutely would not do that. So I figure, okay, I've got to get around this because I need this picture, because there are people we're going to tell that are, you're not going to be employable because of AI. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think, again, this gets back to the whole, people want answers thing. So we're giving them an answer, right? But if we give an answer that is you're going to be unemployed, and we're going to depict a black male who's unemployed, we can't get this picture from ChatGPT. And the style of pictures it generates, right? So they're all kind of the same thing. If we go and try to get this elsewhere, it's going to look stupid. So what I did is I said, okay, give me a picture of a Nigerian man who's unemployed because of AI. I was happy to do that. This Nigerian man was in sort of, kind of traditional African dress. He was wearing a cook's hat, and honestly, he looked like Aunt Jemima in a food court line. I can't use that, right? But it can't figure out my intention when I ask the questions. My intention is to try to be inclusive, and it's treating me like, oh no, you just asked for something we can't give you. And yeah, you're right. That's a problem. Let me ask you this about the Google Gemini thing. Obviously, giant disaster, giant woke disaster. Everybody can see it. Even people who are a little bit more sympathetic to that way of thinking are shaking their heads, because it's just so out in the open. It's so on the mark. Why did they do this? Do you think that was really intentional to do that, or do you think maybe Google was flexing and showing any state actor, Iran, Saudi Arabia, hey, we could take 1,000 of your people, we could put them training a model, and you could have a model that's right in line with whatever value system you have?
I've never thought of it that way. That's interesting. I just thought it was a Gigo issue, honestly. And I was thrilled because the stronger the ridiculousness or the
Right?
outcome, the more people actually will pay
Yeah.
attention to it. It's the subtleties to me that are deadly. Like if we're going to talk about, race issues, for example, watch television sometime and notice in the commercials for all the alarm companies, and I'm stealing this from Adam Carolla, but
Yeah.
he's right. You will find out that everyone who robs houses or everyone who's a criminal
Yeah.
is white.
Oh, you find some interesting things out for sure. They definitely have some new role models cast.
Right, but this isn't
Yeah.
even
This
AI.
is
This is
people casting,
people
exactly.
actively
Casting commercials, casting sitcoms.
doing
Yeah.
this. Every judge in a show, I mean, the vast majority of judges in programs seem to be black females for some reason, which is very interesting. So 13% of the population is
Right.
African American, but yet somehow they're probably 50 something percent of the judges, or at least half of that. So 6% of the population because of female,
Yeah.
7. It seems very interesting. And it's like, yes, you're pushing a narrative. But when you put this stuff in, well, then you're going to have a black
Yeah.
Nazi.
That's like, that should be like really
And
offensive.
that's the problem.
That should be like so ridiculously offensive that people don't want that, but it's not.
Well, that was. I mean, that caused him to pull back Gemini, for the founding fathers, and thank God. But I want these things to come to the extreme because I like to say normies. Normies don't notice, but they will notice that when you drop the ball that hard, it's like, and that kind of result, I feel, is positive because it makes people not trust it. Like the first AI I was dealing with at all, and I barely use it, is Siri from the 2009, 2010, whatever. It was like, oh wow, it's so cool. Where do you hide a body? When it came out, it was hilarious. So that was a delight. But then it was like, do such and such, do do. Just, and over time, I just type it in, and it's because I've gone through that. I don't really use that. So I think that when AI fails that hard, it does plant the seed in people's heads that, this is like Wikipedia. You can't really trust it completely.
Right. It's there. It's a source. It's got its biases. You probably know that. It might be useful for some things. It's not so useful for others. If you want a social cultural lesson or a great economics lesson, listen to the AI. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is where it is, but I don't think it's going away. And I do want to visit with you because I do think it is threatening jobs, genuinely. For example, BuzzFeed reporters.
All right, so you're being funny about this. I mean, yeah, that's
no. But I'm not being funny. I'll give you one that's not funny at all. First year lawyers. Because AI is very good for crunching and finding case law,
but it's also very bad at it. That's the thing. The hallucination problem is huge. And the
well, it's actually getting worse. That's the weird thing. Is it wasn't as bad.
The hallucination problem is not a bug. It's a feature. It's like so. The example I gave you of Paul Bunyan. Tell me a story about Paul Bunyan and Eeyore saving the Oakland A's from having to move to Las Vegas. Right. At that point, you're asking it, just make stuff up and make me entertained. And all these GPTs do a great job of it. I actually run, lots of these queries on a private GPT I have running on my laptop. And whether I have it trained on specific documents, which might be Wikipedia article on the Oakland A's, A.A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh, stories of Paul Bunyan, whatever else, or whether I let it use its general knowledge. This is just to get into nerd detail here, this is the Mistral 7B Instruct model, which is very, very popular with, sort of home enthusiasts. Does a great job with the stories. Like they're funny. I could certainly see these systems being used, if you have kids. Best thing you can do for your kids is have books that they can read and you can read with them. best thing for their literacy, for their their early development of intellect and things like that. Even if you want them to be math and science people, like just being able to read and communicate and share and stuff, like it's so important to their development. Well, I had, my parents bought me like this whole bookshelf of books I could read, from, I think I learned to read about age 3, until I was 8 or 9. And I read all of them and I was out of books, and I'd never be out of books. I'd never be, if somebody can show me, okay, here's some ways to mix these up, and the GPT mixes it up, or I start to learn, hey, I can start to mix up my favorite characters. I mean, that's what we do with play with, with characters, whether we're, running around or whether we're playing with action figures or whatever. We kind of mix these things up anyway. And that's what kids do.
Choose your own adventure on steroids.
Yeah.
Which is cool. By the way, that's threatening a children's author.
Children probably died, 20 years ago, and he's got 50 years of copyright left, right? I mean, so what?
Well, there are modern children's authors. My wife was a library director. So
yeah, no, I have a good friend who's written children's books and is selling them to schools and stuff like that too. Yeah, that's a tough gig, but it's not going to make. It's not making up new characters.
OnlyFans.
It's giving you variation with characters that it knows about. And I think that's kind of a new powerful thing.
It can be, and it's interesting though, because it could be like everything stops at a certain point if there's nothing new being created or imagined to feed into it, to learn from it. But back to the law, of that, if it has, again, all the information contained, like a particular database catalog or whatever, and that's what it's being fed, it can do a pretty good job citing every case that's existed. Now, there are, potential issues, and you might follow up on it, but the amount of labor that can be done by a just brute force search over a person.
Oh yeah, you're certainly not. You're not combing through law journals and whatever else. But we've had systems for lawyers and stuff in place for decades. Where they can electronically look at court cases. They can find a person's criminal history, all sorts of things, all sorts of research that they need to do. These are.
But the precedent aspect, I think, is where it gets really significant, because, I have a case that is this and this and this. And this is where the hallucination actually can help, because you can say, find me a precedent somewhere that is on point or close to being on point. And it spits it out after going through every case in the past 200 years, and all 50 states will just limit it to a U.S., right?
This is another thing where your haystack a lot of these AI problems, your haystack can be so big that the results it comes up with, they don't reach in and pick out the needle. They kind of average out over all these needles in the haystack. And so, a smaller LLM that's focused on, say case law from Orange County, California, or whatever. If you're looking for case law in Orange County, California, that LLM is probably going to do way better for you than a whole U.S. wide case law.
Especially because there is no precedent. There is no case here. So now we've got to look. Has it gone anywhere? Okay, I can quote in New Mexico, there was this ruling and it went up to the Supreme Court as an example. So I'm just saying that is very, very powerful, and it's eliminating a lot of hours and time of research. So that kind of thing, I think it can be a threat, but it also can be leveraged and useful to people too at the same time. There's good and bad. There's an odd one I've thought about recently. OnlyFans. Sorry, but it's kind of like, photoshopping or whatever in reverse, but there's going to be a point with pictures. It's like, are these people?
Yeah,
real?
But I mean, if she has 6 fingers, are you going to be that interested? I mean,
well, I don't know if they'll always have 6 fingers. So, and you never know that.
Maybe that may be a thing. Yeah.
Kink. It could be your kink, but regardless, and it is already a problem. We have the whole Kate and William question of recent. It's like, is this the princess in the picture and her children, or was that an AI? Look at the weird finger.
Well, or was it even just horrible Photoshop. I mean, we've had that forever too, and that could explain that as
Absolutely.
well.
It probably was. It probably was. But then you have deep
Mm-hmm.
fakes, and that starts to become more and more and more of an issue. So a lot of these things I think are actually issues. Again, it can be beneficial, it could be bad. Like we're working on a project right now, an audio drama with Lee
Mm-hmm.
Harvey Oswald. I don't know if you knew this.
Yeah.
He's dead. He died in
Right, but there's
1963.
tapes.
Well, there are, and you know what? I can
Mm-hmm.
emulate his voice. And it's kind of cool having Lee Harvey Oswald speaking lines about his life.
There's no comedian that does a good Lee Harvey Oswald, though, is there?
He's got an odd voice. I don't know if you've
Yeah,
ever heard it. It's a stilted pattern, and it's something. It's that New Orleans kind of
little
accent.
Creole in it.
It's hard to explain.
Yeah, New Orleans is a very dynamic city, just with all sorts of inputs and outputs.
I've been pushing on the job things. What do you see? So you're saying no job is threatened.
I think if you truly are threatened by AI, and if you're truly threatened by AI, and there's different kinds of threats, right? There's the AI actually will replace your job. I don't think that's going to affect very many people. There's the threat of AI is going to replace your job. And this is usually some Dilbert boss, who comes in with his pointy hair and says, AI is going to replace your job. We're negotiating on price right now. I mean, that's the undertone, right? This is something I think every software developer has heard in the last year. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. I'm doing a great job for you. We're getting stuff done faster than we ever have. You're making tons of money, and you're coming to me with this garbage right now. Please. Okay, go hire the AI, and then let me take a 2-month vacation. You go hire the AI, and then I'm going to charge you more when I get back, just for the insult. That seems to be a place where a lot of software developers are right now. At a lot of companies that employ software developers, it's very similar to outsourcing efforts. Sure, you can outsource a lot of coding to India, and you get a lot of garbage from them. If you need high quality coding, you're not doing that. Same kind of thing applies with AI, but we have to go through the motions of negotiating over it. You had the actor strike, which was primarily based on that,
which is very legit, by the way. Like I was just talking about voices, right? Stephen Fry found out that he was a narrator.
Oh, sure, that's terrible. That's absolutely terrible. Agreed.
That's a legit scary thing. And then now that's stealing his identity and doing it. But the AI has the capability of creating a unique voice that is now a narrator, and that puts somebody out of work. Genuinely, that is now serving a purpose or a role for this. Now, it's not perfect yet, and a lot of this is the yet. We understand that. No, it's not ready. Kind of like it's 6 fingers now, but is it going to be 6 fingers next year? We don't know.
Well, I mean, unless you introduce real physical models into it, or some sort of ability to detect all of these potential errors that come out and then filter those out and try again, which is expensive. There's the at what cost question with a lot of this stuff too, right? I mean, we can deliver this system that's say 80% good at this low cost, but to get to 90% good, we're going to triple the cost. Do we do that?
Well, that's like I know that graphics cards have gone from Bitcoin mining to AI demand.
That's probably how you know that half of it's a scam, right? I mean,
in a sense, but yeah, I mean the graphics cards. There's been a run on that market. NVIDIA is one of the happiest companies in the world.
Well, their CEO getting out and saying we'll have AGI, generalized artificial intelligence. We'll have that within 5 years. He's pumping his cards, like he's creating a market for his cards. Everybody's excited about it. He'll sell a lot of graphics cards. That's great. Using methods we're using right now and anything that's in the pipeline, we will not have AI with a consciousness and self-directed or anything. It's just not. It doesn't do that. There's got to be a fundamental change in how we do these calculations for that to occur, and we don't have it even in the pipeline.
Well, no, because you would depend on it itself
Yeah,
developing itself to the point to get that, and it's not able to, because. But I argue again that's because of garbage in, garbage out, because we're dealing with the programmers and what has been put in. So it probably can't get there on this path. It would have to almost be a burn it down, as you said, and retrain
well,
or
it's burn
whatever.
it down and find new computational methods. These computational methods will not do it.
Hmm.
You could scale it 1,000 times, 10,000 times. LLMs will not gain consciousness, or we have these old tests like the Turing test, and everybody says, "Oh, it probably satisfies the Turing test." Yeah, it's wordsmithing. It's
It kind of does.
wordsmithing its way to doing it. You've seen people just talk word salad. I think that the best example I have. I mean, I love the SpaceX broadcast, but they put they put the cute blonde out there to announce the SpaceX things, and she's very very good at stringing sentences together in the middle of things that absolutely mean nothing. They're complete. I mean, it's
But that's corporate mottos. I mean, that's mission statements. We've had it for 30 years, 40 years.
I know it's all cute, but at the end of the day, she's filling time. There's no silence in it. She's filling time with words that are just spewing out of her mouth kind of randomly that make sentences.
The worst I've seen is Quora is turning into just a cesspool. If you look at why you ask if such and such is such and such, people are astounded to
Yeah.
consider that, and it's this purple prose style, and that to me is like an AI marker. Is it a lot of almost purple prose, overly florid, not direct?
Look, we
Just
have a vice president
you
who
know,
speaks like an LLM. Okay, I mean, I think that's the ultimate thing of the Turing test, right? You can't tell the human from the computer. I mean, but then you look at it and you're like, well, wait a minute, none of it makes sense. That's not really intelligence there. It's wordsmithing.
on that note, you see, I see it coming in and affecting the arts. I'm going to keep going back to that. And there's a gentleman named Rick Beato on YouTube, huge channel, and he's brought up some really solid points. And one of his is the overuse of auto
Oh
tune
yeah, horrible.
is turning right, but it has actually turned human beings into sounding like robots. So I can take a song and say, sing this song, and it would be AI generated. You won't be able to tell if it's an actual human being or if it's AI, partly because of auto tune and things that we're doing to ourselves, like quantizing the drum
Yeah,
beats.
but okay, so I'm a budding musician, and I have of course messed with quantization and everything else, and I know touring musicians and I know recording musicians and stuff, and I know at ground level what this problem looks like and what it sounds like, and what it sounds like is it's it's unnatural. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like for instance, I have what's the Drum Whatever Pro from uh I have the package that does all the drum sounds for me. I play guitar. It does all that, and I can play along with it and stuff like that. I have a friend who's a drummer in a blues band. Occasionally, I'll send him, "Hey, I'm kind of trying to do something like this. Could you lay down a drum track for me?" And he'll lay down the drum track, and that is magical to play with. Compared to, I mean, it sounds like if you listen to it on level, 3 on your headphones, you probably wouldn't tell the difference. But then when you listen to it and you try to play with it, you're like, "Oh yeah, he's kind of pushing there. He's kind of doing this."
Right. But the
Yeah.
point is that, for example, EDM can vary heavily. And wow, that's a whole genre. And as that becomes more and more popular, yes, you cannot emulate a live show. But meanwhile, a lot of live artists are getting to busking
Hmm.
level now. I mean, it's a very difficult
Hmm.
problem. We've got currently Sweden, who's pumping in all of pop music. I am saying that pop music could be AI driven or taken over at least major
In a
quantities
minute.
of it. And but that's work. That's not only the musicians who are doing it, but it's also the producers, the people who are recording. It's manufacturing of instruments. So these things, You may not see it immediately, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a farther reaching effect.
I mean, I guess my theory on can AI replace people is, if you get replaced, you probably deserve it, and it's a cruel thing to say, but it just means that you're not producing value above what synthetic automation driven value can be produced, and that's a tough place to be in. I don't really think artists are really in that.
Like industrial is definitely a serious mix of real and other. New Order, Blue Monday, that's a real bass that is being played against drums, and so samples. It's just another form of music. I'm not going
Yeah,
to get in and judge a
let's
type
talk
of
about
music
let's talk about
because
EDM
there
today
is
and
value.
EDM performances today. There's nobody strumming a bass. That was done in a studio. It's all sample driven. Um, and okay, I mean, so that makes it very very easy to automate. Can you do you have do you have AI blues bands out there?
Not yet, but I hope people still enjoy the
Oh yeah,
blues
yeah,
that pay
agreed,
for it.
agreed.
The same way as those voiceover artists I'm
Yeah,
talking about. They have value. They have genuine artistic value and training. Years to have a good inflection and tone for a type of commercial. And
one of the things I'm interested. I actually mastered an audiobook, and we of course had to use because we wanted it on Amazon. We had to use a live reader. He was not very good at reading. So what I did with him is I had him speak one sentence at a time, and every sentence came out, high energy. And then as an audio engineer, I put those together. So, as you're listening to him read a paragraph, there's no die off of his energy level as a paragraph goes on. It's like very, very energetic. It sounded great, right? It sounded like okay, maybe you could do this with a computerized voice or whatever else, and not have those things that make listening to a human sound sort of terrible. You could, but well, I did this with a human, and um, there was still things where like he could just go into like a comedian's voice, and do an impression, and it was like it was really really hilarious, and it was something that only a voice could do. If you were programming that, it would take you I mean, it'd take you longer than just having somebody read it. I mean, it would take the engineer would spend more money on his skills than having a good reader do the reading. And I think that's the production cost is probably what's going to save a lot of these artists. Is it's not just automatic. It's like you want to do different varied things that the program's never thought of. What do you human voice can do that. The computer voice, not so much. It does what it's programmed to do.
true. Or you have the flip side where it says, "Do we really need that comic impersonation?" Nah,
Oh, it made the book. It made the
just leave it
book.
out.
In fact, we had to.
I'm sure it did, but I've done
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
audiobook narration.
yeah,
It's a nightmare, and I know exactly that because one, you're sitting there
yeah.
reading, and it's like da da da. Oh no, it's not a question. I'm not ending on an up. I need to end on a down, and it just it's so tedious because I am really really
Yeah,
picky, and I would read the sentence and I'd be like. And then I back all the way up because I want the
right.
inflection right. I don't, it's like if I end on an uptick, that sounds like a question.
Hey, if you had on
If
an
I
uptick,
end
it sounds
on,
like a
or if I'm
Kardashian,
asking,
right? I mean,
right, or if you're like, I don't know, what do you think?
yeah,
No,
yeah.
that doesn't work, and you, and it's difficult. I'm obviously
Not you're
exaggerating,
not
but
really
it is
exaggerating. We had
a
two. We had two editors listening as we were recording, and like a sentence would come out, and somebody'd say, "No, do it again." And as we're putting this all together, I mean, it's a tremendous production, especially when you're working with somebody who's not a great he's not a great reader.
now. I find that author read translates better with nonfiction in general because now you're just saying a voice, da da da, whatever. But like Harlan Coben, I don't want to beat the guy up. Sorry, Harlan, if you watch this, I do want to interview you at some point. But he read his own, and he had a great audiobook narrator who had done all the characters, had established it. And to me, that's part of the magic of an audiobook is when you have a narrator and you have an author, they actually influence each other, and the product sometimes is even better, because it's the same way that you could be a great director or you could be a good writer, but until the actor gets on that movie, that actor brings their own
I'm going to change my
value,
opinion here,
their
and I'm going to
own
say my
emotions and
opinion
feelings.
applies to nonfiction. How about that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and that's kind of where I feel is nonfiction, yes. But fiction, no, having the actors really of use
Okay.
for a narrator good. But unless their author is good. Some authors are
Mhm.
good readers.
Some authors are good talkers and not good readers. I've been, even as he was canceled, I've been a fan of Scott Adams. Dilbert, referenced him earlier, Dilbert Boss, but Dilbert creator. And, a year ago he was writing his book, and he had to do the audiobook, and he's got, he had like 2 years when he couldn't talk because of audio dysphonia, couldn't
Same
talk.
condition,
And he's also dyslexic. So reading this book was absolutely a no-go. And so he was looking, this is a year ago, at AI systems that could capture his voice and then read the book for him. Not workable, not feasible. And then he finally got he got somebody to read his book for him.
I thought he did read
He's read previous books, but this last book, he did not read his own.
Okay.
He couldn't do it.
It's too damn exhausting.
Oh yeah, agreed.
Again,
agreed. It's a lot of work.
So it's like
Right.
never mind. And then if you have a professional, that to me, I think is the answer. Is you find somebody who tonally is somewhat similar to. Now, where it's a big problem, especially in nonfiction, is when you have somebody who's a YouTuber or a podcaster, and then they have a narrator. It's like,
that guy should be able to read his book. Yeah, he talks for a living. What's going on here?
Or an actor. If an actor's writing an autobiography and they have somebody else do it, you're just like, no, Al Pacino. I'm not saying he did it, but it's just a good example of like somebody who has such a distinctive voice.
Well, right. If Al Pacino doesn't read his book, then Jay Moore better read his book.
No, that would be good.
He does a great Al Pacino, but yes, he does.
Yes, he does. He does, and he's done it to Al Pacino apparently.
Right at the pier with the seagulls, according to the story. But
so on that note, let's go and wrap up. What is the one question that I should have asked you, but I did not?
What are the camps of the AI people right now? I'll answer it for you really quickly. They're the doomers. Everything's going to be bad. AI is going to cause, global catastrophe. There are the sunshine pumpers. These are the people that say, hey, AI is going to do all these wonderful things for us. They tend to not ask at what cost. There are the aggressive positivity folks. AI is going to take away your job, so you better figure out what to do. All these people are full of beans. They have no basis for what they're saying. The sunshine pumpers a little less so. I mean, they're just naturally, they're like Tigger in Winnie the Pooh. Okay, they're a little bit too enthusiastic. You got to ask yourself, what's it good for, and see it at ground level. When you see that it works, use it for that. That's what you should use it for. When people are telling you, oh, it's going to do this and it's going to do that, be skeptical.
All right. Sounds perfect. Brad, thank you so much for this wide-ranging, sprawling, meandering.
But that's the best, right? I mean, that's what you should expect from AI, is just wide-ranging, meandering. And Eric, I really appreciate your time and appreciate the interview.